some criminal networks, they operate in the shadows, but others, they operate right out in the open. They're protected by something far more sophisticated, an architecture of power, of finance, and of secrecy. This is a forensic look into one of those networks, a system built not just to commit crimes, but to make sure no one was ever held accountable.
We own the police. Think about that for a second. According to victim Virginia Giffrey, this wasn't just a boast, it was her operational philosophy. It defined a system that truly believed it was above any law, any government, and any form of justice. So, to understand this architecture, we have to start with its outer shield, this social network. And this wasn't just a group of friends. No, this was a carefully engineered web of influence designed to provide legitimacy and open doors to the highest levels of global society.
At the very heart of this network was a single document, the infamous Little Black Book. Inside, over 1,500 names. This was no simple address book. It was a strategic map connecting politicians, royalty, billionaires, and celebrities, a meticulously curated directory of power.
The flight logs from Epstein's private jets, they show us the hierarchy of this network. Right at the top, you have the operational core. Ghislaine Maxwell with 520 flights and scheduler Sarah Kellen with 350. They ran the logistics. And then you have this curated list of the world's most powerful people flown in to create an aura of legitimacy. Now, it is absolutely crucial to state that just being on these logs is not, by itself, evidence of any wrongdoing.
Okay, so behind that glittering social facade, there was a machine. A very sophisticated financial fortress designed for one purpose: to fund and to conceal a global sex trafficking operation. Let's break down exactly how it worked.
The building blocks of this fortress? Shell companies, over 30 of them. And they were registered in places like the U.S. Virgin Islands for a reason: corporate secrecy. These weren't just for avoiding taxes. They were legal weapons, used to create layers and layers of separation to make it almost impossible to trace the money or prove who owned what. This network basically took the classic money laundering playbook and adapted it. First, placement. Hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash pulled from major banks. That untraceable cash was used to pay victims and recruiters. Second, layering. The money was then moved through that maze of shell companies, mixing it all up to hide where it came from. And finally, integration. The now clean money was used to buy the very assets, the jets, the mansions, the private island, that gave the network its power and its allure. And make no mistake, this wasn't a small-time operation. We're talking about over $1 billion. That's a billion with a B. That's how much money flowed through Epstein-related accounts at just two banks, JP Morgan Chase and Deutsche Bank. A staggering number that really shows you the scale of this enterprise and the institutions that helped make it possible. So that financial engine, it powered the physical infrastructure. Private aviation wasn't a luxury, it was a critical operational tool. It was a way to move people, both the perpetrators and their victims, across borders, far beyond the scrutiny of commercial airlines and law enforcement. The network's map was global, and it was strategic. You had New York, the financial command center; Palm Beach, the primary recruitment ground. The U.S. Virgin Islands offered a shield of financial secrecy and that secluded private island. And across the Atlantic, Paris and London were the gateways to European power and royalty. Every single hub was a critical node in a logistical machine that was built for abuse and influence. And the flight logs, they confirm this dual purpose. The vast majority of flights, over 870 of them, were for the operational core, the people managing the trafficking ring day in and day out. Then you had a much smaller but very significant number of flights for high-profile guests. So the jet was both a shuttle for the conspirators and a lure for the powerful. An operation this fast can't survive on its own. It needs more than just criminals. It needs enablers. And in this case, the enablers weren't just individuals. They were entire institutions. This is the true architecture of impunity. You know, the law here is clear. Banks are required to report suspicious activity. High-risk clients like Epstein, who is a convicted sex offender, demand enhanced monitoring. But the reality was very different. At JP Morgan, we have internal memos that show compliance officers raised red flags for years. These warnings were documented, they were discussed, and then they were consistently overruled by senior executives who wanted to keep the profits coming. The failure was systemic.
You had banking institutions that processed over $1 billion while ignoring clear digital signs of human trafficking. You had law enforcement that was first warned about Epstein's abuse in 1996, but waited a full decade to open an investigation. And finally, the justice system itself, the supposed backstop, gave Epstein a secret deal that shielded not just him, but his entire network from federal accountability. Each pillar, built to protect us, buckled under the weight of influence.
For decades, this system of impunity held strong. But here's the thing about the digital age. It creates a permanent record. Flight logs, financial statements, court documents. It's a data trail that you can't just burn. And eventually, that data started to surface. For a decade, that 2008 deal ensured digital silence. But the data trail, it never really went cold. It took fearless journalism in 2018, digging through old records to force a new federal investigation. After Epstein's arrest and Maxwell's conviction, the pressure just kept mounting until the final firewall collapsed. In 2025, the Epstein Files Transparency Act was passed, ordering the unsealing of a huge digital archive that had been hidden from the public for years. The sheer scale of this cover-up forced the highest levels of government to finally act. In 2025, the U.S. Congress launched its own formal investigation, not just into Epstein, but into the decades of systemic failure by federal agencies that allowed his network to thrive. So, what happens when a system built on secrecy is suddenly flooded with light? The release of over 3 million pages of documents in 2026 wasn't just a leak, it was a digital deluge. It triggered a global forensic audit of power and influence that is still going on to this day. The consequences were immediate, and they were international. In France, for example, prosecutors opened an investigation into former culture minister Jacques Lang, who was mentioned over 600 times in the digital files. This was never just an American scandal, it was a global network, and the data trail was finally leading back to its enablers all over the world. This forensic analysis, it reveals a chilling truth. Jeffrey Epstein was not the ultimate threat. The true danger is a system that allows wealth, power, and influence to create a parallel reality, one where the powerful are protected and the vulnerable are silenced. This case forces all of us to ask a fundamental question, not just about one man, but about the systems we are supposed to trust. If an architecture of impunity can be built around one network, how many others are operating in the shadows right now? If immense wealth can buy its own form of justice, then what does accountability even mean for the rest of us? Let us know what you think in the comments below. Getting these files unsealed was a victory for transparency, for sure. But the fight against networks that operate in the dark requires constant vigilance. If you believe in this work, you can support real investigations by subscribing to BlackCode.